We'll get started. Good day to you. I'm Becky King.
And I'm Dana Keep.
And we are very excited today to share with you, and this will be recorded, to share with you networking and what it is, what it isn't, how to take the work out of networking, and all of the other things that you've probably heard over the years. We decided to plan this for this date because it tends to be a good time for bringing people together. It's the end of the year. Start of a new year coming up, but really whenever you're listening to this or watching this at any time of year, connecting with people is what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. And why is networking such a negative word? I think quite often people interpret it as a negative thing, like eat more fiber, go network. And we hope that at the end of our session today, you will appreciate that it's building bridges, building connections, deepening relationships, and finding more meaning and connection, and not slimy, fake, forced.
Handing out 500 business cards.
Exactly. And that the quality matters more than the quantity of your connections. And so without further ado, that's the overview today is we're going to talk about networking outside the workplace, inside the workplace, and some actual mechanical tips of how to network, and even some recommended questions for you to use. And we are leaving plenty of time for questions, and there will be a chat bar where you can enter any questions that you have. And so I'm just going to get started. So when you hear that we're saying networking is not about just frenetically meeting people and collecting hundreds of business cards that mean nothing and you've forgotten about them a month later. When you hear us talk about building relationships, what does that mean to you? So maybe, thinking about that, Dana, I'll get started on that one and then shift over. So making friends, think about when you're, from way back, thousands of years ago in the marketplace, people would share information. Who has brought in the biggest haul of fish? Who has the best meat? Who collected the best fruit or vegetables? A matter of survival was swapping information. And today, we're still sharing information. It's just that we've gone into this hyper digital age. And I think the downside of that is we're losing the personal connection. Mm-hmm. So something Dana and I have spent a lot of time talking about is the importance of reconnecting face-to-face, the importance of the human connection. So think about it as making friends. You're also helping others. I think that's an important point.
Absolutely.
You are not taking. This is not take, me. It's all about what I need. It's about what can I bring in that would be meaningful and helpful to others around me today. Finding common ground and a shared purpose, particularly for Wellesley, we know that finding meaning and purpose is important. So we want that to be a focus for you, is sharing that as a mission together, sharing values, learning together. We hope that, all of you share our, lifelong love of learning. Mm-hmm. And I think the innate curiosity is really what drives an effective network connection. And finally, thinking about this as mutually beneficial. I think if I boil it down to its essence, the best definition I've heard of is networking is building and maintaining relationships for mutual benefit to access and share information. So outside of work,
that's a great definition. And I think if you can reframe it, as Becky has suggested, into something that's much more comfortable and positive, it's going to be that much easier to get out there. So if you haven't ever done any networking or informational interviewing, or if you haven't done it in 10 or 15 years, hopefully we'll be able to help you with that today. And so the first thing that people think of is, okay, I have my job, I have my circle of friends. How do I expand beyond that and really meet more people who share my professional interests? You can do this formally or informally, but really where you start is thinking about people that are maybe one step removed from you, or not your immediate family, not your immediate closest friends, but you might start by thinking about your fellow alumni at Wellesley or your graduate school. You can find them on the Hive, and you can find them on LinkedIn, and we can help you do that if you're not sure how to do it. You might want to think about former colleagues. Again, at one point you were close, but now you haven't been in touch with them for a while, but people love reconnecting. You might think about, friends of friends, or, neighbors that they do something interesting, but you've never really asked them about it. And these kinds of connections, you might have a conversation just while you're out walking around your neighborhood, or you might actually request a conversation and say, hey, I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. I know you're doing some interesting work and I'm really curious about it. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? So the informal and the formal can both be helpful. Sometimes you have an informal conversation with somebody while you're, watching your kids play soccer, or watching a band concert, and then that leads to a more formal conversation where you actually say, this was really interesting. I'd love to continue the conversation. Could we have lunch? Mm-hmm. So those are the who you might reach out to: alums, former colleagues, friends, neighbors, friends of friends. And you might meet them for the first time. You might be reconnecting with people. The other thing you can do to meet more people is a little bit more deliberate, and that is to actually join a shared interest group. Maybe you have a committee in your town that you're interested in being on. Maybe your apartment building has a committee that you'd like to join. Maybe you will meet people by doing a volunteer role or helping with some nonprofit that's important to you, or a Day to Make a Difference, or some like Habitat for Humanity project, or things like that. Obviously, going to conferences that are in your field are great. Trade shows, yep, great places to find other people, maybe have an informal conversation, and then see if, out of some of those people, you might want to connect with some of them further. Not everybody, but some of them. And then finally, you might also, at conferences or at more formal business meetings, see people who have your role in other organizations, and they can be really interesting people to add to your network because you have shared interests, you have shared goals, and you can share information with each other.
Good. And I'm thinking of also Meetups as a good outlet, readily available in almost all urban areas. Meetup.com, and then select your city. And you can put in the search bar whatever your particular interests are, for anything from language tables to for fun, I'm thinking of that, and also professional association and interest groups that way. But I think I've really made the most meaningful connections as Dana was speaking. I was thinking of examples. In theater, for me, certainly a large cast, and you find out that, of course, you're sharing a love of theater together, but don't forget, you are each coming from different jobs. We're doing community theater, it's not paid. So everybody's working outside of that. So you find out different things from different people, and it can be as basic as favorite ice cream shop or pizzeria, but it can also go into professional, meaningful information sharing for you. So good points there.
Absolutely.
I think, so outside of work, we often think of networking as outside of our job, or if we're unemployed, into a job situation, and it has to be professional. But
actually, I think sometimes we think when we get to work, we're so busy doing our job, but there's actually some networking you can do within your own company or organization. And some people, I just don't even think it occurs to them.
Yeah. And of course, it turns out that we spend over a quarter of our lives in work. And so it makes sense that within your workplace is naturally also a place that you want to be networking and building relationships. And sadly, I think we get very busy. Many people get very busy doing their work and forget that it's a lost opportunity to build that friendship or connection, build a bond beyond just this project that needs to get done. And what can you do to change that? Well, if you have a staff meeting, a weekly staff meeting, lucky you, that's a chance in a weekly staff meeting for any updates, any announcements. That's a chance for you to say something that's important to you or to ask a question. Don't forget, asking questions can also, engender interest from other people. Even in the elevator, if you're in a building with an elevator, while you're waiting for the elevator to get to floor 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever, ideal opportunity to, and again, it can be small talk, but it tends to generate a communal interest from there, and then you can go beyond that. People in your direct office, of course, you see every day, but even then, I feel that often people can be in such a hurry, rushing from the photocopier back to their desk, instead of saying, hey, how you doing? And as you know, quite often you've seen the joke of how you doing as people are already out the door. Stop and take the time to say, how are you doing? I was thinking about you. It's been several months since your grandmother died, or, how are you feeling? Or check in with people. It really makes a difference.
What are you working on right now?
What are some projects? Are you feeling overwhelmed? This is a busy time of year for you, isn't it? Or it making a point of expressing that interest in somebody else, because quite often you get into this sort of silo, mindset in the workplace. So coffee talk, lunch conversations, if there's an opportunity for that, outside of your desk is really important. So don't eat your lunch at your desk if you can help it. I once read an article that said, what a wasted opportunity to eat alone at your desk. You should always make a point of, hey, are you going to the such and such down the road cafeteria? Do you want to, come with me, or can I grab something for you, or anything like that that would hopefully lead to a communal shared meal as an opportunity to, again, get to know one another better. And outside of your office, so here I am speaking about inside your office, all of this applies. But outside your office, and again, here we are on Wellesley's campus, ideal opportunity to connect with other departments. So, and many of you are in places where there will be other divisions, or it's a large company and there are, geographic divisions in different areas. So obviously you think, well, that's very challenging. I have a Seattle office and a New York office. What do we do about that? And virtual meetings can happen. It's not ideal, but if they happen to have an annual conference where people can get together, that would be the ideal. But if they don't, see if you can connect, over email, over virtual connections. It's just that much more important, and it opens up opportunities for you should you wish to move from Seattle to New York, vice versa. You get the idea. So another thing you can do, other than socializing with those other divisions, departments, and people outside of your office and inside your office, is to volunteer for committee work. So, and again, this can help if there's, for example, here again at Wellesley, or think about it in your own situation, we're trying to communicate across departments. So we might have a committee meeting. Anyone interested in joining that? Yes, you are interested in joining that, because that's an ideal opportunity for you to both share what your own office is doing and learn about what others in the larger ecosystem are doing. And perhaps you'll find out that is a job more suited to what you want to do, or you'll help someone else decide what you're doing might be more suitable for them and whatnot. All right. If there are stretch assignments beyond the purview of what you are assigned to accomplish and do in your work, and I realize you may feel like, no, I'm busy enough, thank you very much. But if you can take on a stretch assignment, it's a way to expand your skill set and raise your profile, and also get to know other people better. You might also ask colleagues how they might approach professional development, any professional development opportunities they found particularly meaningful. If it comes time for that annual, make a decision about which conference to attend, or which training to attend. I think you would concur with this. And also it could begin with simple things like commute workarounds or challenges, or routes to work. If you drive in a similar direction, do you know of a particular back road that avoids that traffic tangle? That can be, again, an opener that can lead to a deeper conversation. So I think I'm thinking of times I took the commuter train, and just walking with people from our streets up to the commuter train itself, being on the platform, being on the train itself. All of this is time that you can be conversing with other people. So think about these opportunities in your own lives, I think, and how you can increase and get to know, not just quantitatively, but increase qualitatively the relationships that you have.
That makes me think of a few specific examples that I've talked with Wellesley alums about that they've tried and that have helped them either do their job better or that have led them to a different job. One person was very focused on sustainability, and so she volunteered for the committee in her organization that was helping their company become more green, and she got so excited about it that she completely switched careers. Another person was just really creative about celebrations and probably was, a hidden party planner in her, or, party planner in her other life. And she was really good at helping when there was a big anniversary celebration coming up at their company. And I think that helped her meet a lot of people in the company she would not have otherwise met. Some people are really interested in human resources, and seeing if you can get on a hiring committee really gives you insight into what human resources people do and how what's important in the hiring process in your organization. And the final one I would say is that some people, I've seen some people offer to help with editing or writing, and then that enabled them to sit in on a meeting that they otherwise wouldn't have sat in on, and so they got to see a bigger picture about where something went because they just had good editing skills. So those are some examples of how people might do more. And, obviously there's only 24 hours in the day, but you're doing your work. But if you can carve out a little time for some of these other things, they can be incredibly enriching.
Well, I think just as we were saying earlier, this is not to say that you need to know everybody at your company. If your company is 500 people, we're not anticipating that that's going to happen. But even the 15 to 20 to 30 people that you may be seeing regularly, how well do we really know them, right? So that's a way that you can focus on it. And, when you're thinking about these stretch assignments or committees to join, or where strategically you might, want to get more involved in the workforce, think about it this way. You can focus on your strengths and the things that you're good at. You mentioned a minute ago, a hidden event planner, waiting to be born. Maybe you do feel like logistics are a strong point for you. One of your strengths is connecting people. So you volunteer for the event planning committee. Fine. But maybe you feel that you're not as strong in a certain area, but you want to get better at something. I'm not terribly good at event planning. I'm not sure I've planned a lot of events, but gee, I'd like to be better at that. And it turns out no one else is stepping forward to volunteer to plan the gathering. So you might do that. And in the process, you become better at event planning. So it's a way to develop new skills as well as lean on your strengths. So something else we wanted to make sure that those of you joining us and listening later on, we're aiming this at everybody. It was sent out to a large population of alums because this is pertinent whether you're a current student, whether you're a recent grad, whether you're mid-career, or whether you're looking for the, encore career at this point in your life. All of these tips at how to start this conversation, what conversation to have, how do I do it? What's the magic formula? We're looking at things, the next phase here is we'd like to address different populations that this might appeal to. So I'll turn to Dana for that.
Right. Becky and I have had people say to us, I'm too shy to do this, or I'm such an introvert, I can't do it, or I'm too old to do this, or I'm too young to talk to somebody who's really high up in a company. So we hear it all, and all, everyone has to take into account their own style. It's not that there's a one size fits all formula here, but keeping in mind your own strengths, your own personality, and where you are in life, I think everyone can find a way to effectively build relationships. So let's take, for example, those introverts. Many times introverts are reluctant to network because they think, I just don't want to run out of things to say. What if there's a lot of silence? And I know that that's a big fear. So right then and there, you can come up with a list yourself. Becky and I would be delighted to help you come up with a list. But if you have a list of 20 or 25 questions for a 20 or 30 minute informational interview, you're really not going to run out of questions. So that's part of your preparation. And something that can help you even ask better questions. So that's an important thing for introverts. Introverts also need to think about pacing themselves. Oftentimes, if you're thinking of moving to a new city, we would recommend trying to travel there if it's practical from a financial standpoint, and meet with a few people in that city. But if you're an introvert and you plan 6 meetings for one day, you're gonna just collapse. That's really not realistic. So maybe you can't stay that long, but definitely try to pace yourself. Or if you're just networking within your own city, spread them out because we know it takes a lot of energy to do that. And you're also welcome to practice with us or with a friend. It's amazing how much a mock conversation, a mock informational interview can help. All of a sudden, you feel 100 times more confident. Oh, I can do this. And I wouldn't recommend that you ask, the CEO of Nike for your first informational interview. Start with somebody who's a little bit closer to your age, a recent grad. If you're a recent grad, start with somebody or start with one of us where there's no, the stakes are low and you can just practice, and the confidence will really rocket ship up when you do that. On the other hand, if you're an extrovert, you might need to practice asking the open-ended questions and then being quiet and listening. If you might have to practice listening and asking follow-up questions instead of jumping in with, and now something about me. Sometimes if you're an extrovert who's talking with an introvert, introverts take a little more time to formulate their thoughts in general. So, and extroverts don't like silence. So you might have to pause and allow the person you're speaking with to actually think about what they want to say. And that can take some practice and getting used to, but it's definitely not insurmountable. So that's the introvert extrovert.
I'm just going to cut into and remind all of you listening who are introverts and think your idea of networking, that's sort of like hell, is to remember that one of the strengths of being an introvert is you are an innate active listener. You are a better listener than you are a speaker, right? Is traditionally or stereotypically what introverts feel. So listening will come naturally to you. Yeah. And the extroverts, as Dana said, our job as extroverts is to ask a question and really listen and be quiet and be okay with quiet and silence and pause and wait, because yes,
right. You cannot underestimate the strength of being a good listener. It's a fantastic strength to have. Let's talk a little bit about what if you're a recent grad, or what if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and how do you approach networking differently? I think you do have to keep in mind that you would ask different kinds of questions, maybe depending on who you're speaking with and where you are in your career. And you also might have different ways of offering help or creating a reciprocal relationship. If you're a recent grad talking to someone who's in their mid-career, it's less likely that you'll be able to help them with a work problem that they have, but perhaps you can. Maybe they have a daughter who's interested in going to Wellesley, and you can tell them, you can offer to speak with their daughter. Maybe they are from a city where you are going to visit. Maybe they could share with you some tips or suggestions for a museum to go to in your city. So there are ways for you to be reciprocal, but it's different. If you're a mid-career person talking to a mid-career person, and you're both struggling with something, you might really be able to help each other with, I'll be happy to take a look at that proposal if you want an outside opinion, or I could introduce you to my friend who I think knows about what you're trying to do at your company. So what you can help with and the kinds of questions you will ask are a little bit different. And you do have to keep in mind, if you're a very young person talking to somebody several decades older than you, you're probably asking more about their perspective and their advice. And if you're talking to someone who's close to your age, maybe you're sharing a few more stories about your workplace culture, and maybe you can be a little bit more curious about that, where you might not ask somebody several decades older than you. But we're happy to be sounding boards. Becky, that was what I was looking for. We're happy to be sounding board for that. And, if you want to say, would this be appropriate, or could I ask this, it's helpful, and we're happy to help with that all the time. So,
yeah. And I do think at its essence, everything we're saying comes down to give first. If you're wondering, well, I want to get this, I need this, what can I give? What can I offer first? And again, you may feel like, oh, I'm 21. What do I have to offer to someone who's been in the workforce for 20 years? And I will argue that you always have something in common. Always. There's always something you can find that you can share, that that will be of benefit to the other person if you ask, if you look for it.
Sometimes people who've been working for a long time are actually very grateful to get the perspective of a young person, because they might ask you something about technology that you know more about than they do. Not how do you do an Excel spreadsheet, but do you think this marketing plan would be appropriate to people in your generation, or something like that? So anyway, you're right. Asking, being curious, offering your perspective, and offering other things that you that you might be able to help with.
So quite often the question is, well, this is all well and good, but how do I do this? What do I actually, this whole networking thing? And you've mentioned informational interviews, which, in case I don't know that we introduced that properly, but informational interviews, in case you don't know, are when you are interviewing someone, but not interviewing in the job interview situation. And it's much, I find it less stressful, because it isn't going in for an interview, I must sell myself into this job. You are playing journalist. You get to role play. So it takes all the pressure off of you, and you get to go out and pretend that you're getting the story. What's the story on a day in the life of this person, and what matters to this person? And let's ask this person, why do they do what they do? What do they do? What do they find most effective? And so that's the informational interview situation. Also, there are events, and we've talked about conferences, trade shows, and other ways, that you'll get together with people, parent-teacher meetings, and at school sessions, and soccer matches, and baseball games, and whatever. So at events, speaking of sort of how do we go about this? Well, how do you even start? How do you start connecting with someone, or even start going to this workshop or this conference? Typically, you'll reach out to someone over email, or you'll find out word of mouth from someone about a conference, or you'll just register for something, and there you'll be. So how do I reach out to someone appropriately? Probably you'd want to begin with email, not a phone call. Phone calls can catch someone, in the middle of dinner or at a bad time. So probably an email is the best way to start, or a LinkedIn request. And what I mean by that is not just going through LinkedIn and clicking connect. This would, in terms of email, in terms of LinkedIn etiquette, best practice would be look at the person's profile, have heard about the person, first of all, from multiple sources, ideally, but you've identified by looking through their profile. Then when you click connect, it'll say, do you wish to send this person a note? Yes, you do. You get 300 characters to then write a personal note. My colleague Dana mentioned that you've written a book. I was very interested to see the book, and I bought it, and I'm so pleased you wrote it. It's very helpful. I look forward to having future conversations with you. Connect, right? So that's already better than just the generic, I want to be in your network, click connect. So that's one outreach piece there. And there's a lot more we could say on LinkedIn, which we're not going to probably have time for today. But also be ready yourself with an introduction. I think it's important to go into any conference, event, or frankly, coming back after a week of vacation, prepared to give, how was your week off? How was your vacation? And know that people will ask, and have something that is both about your trip and might include them or bring them into the mix. Or, yeah, I was thinking about you because I remember you shared with me what happened to you when you went to visit the same place. And guess what? We went into that same museum, and that way you're bringing them in, right, into your conversation. So that's important.
One thing I hear a lot, and we hear a lot, I'm sure you do too, is, I've reached out to like 10 people and only 2 responded. Or, what if you meet 20 people at a conference and you follow up with them and only 5 responded? I mean, can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So just so you don't feel hurt and, wondering, did I do something wrong? Statistically, you are going to reach out to 20 people, 50 people. You're not going to hear back from 50 people. It just doesn't happen. So most likely you should, figure that if you reach out to 10, for example, and you hear back from, maybe only 3 or 4, that's okay. That's par for the course. And again, it's not about quantity, it's about the quality. So if the other people you reached out to are too busy or,
missed the email,
okay, that's okay. You can try them later.
I think we should also just reiterate here, as I mentioned earlier, the Hive is Wellesley's own, Wellesley only networking platform, and many people have joined the Hive because they're very excited to do these kinds of conversations. We also recommend looking on LinkedIn, where there are many more Wellesley alums at the moment, and not every single one has joined LinkedIn for this express purpose, but many of them are very happy to do it too.
No, but there are 23,000 plus
25,000
Wellesley alums in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And there are 5,000 plus alums and current students in the Hive. So definitely we urge you to start with that. But obviously some of you are in Facebook groups too, and whatever works. The meetups I mentioned earlier, whatever works for you. The point is to get together with people who share that common, either if it's a school, the commonality of Wellesley, or professional associations or other things. Being ready with your elevator pitch or who you are, your introduction. Again, if it's an event, a quick tip on that, I would suggest if you're particularly nervous going into events or networking events, make you start to sweat, bring a friend. Bring a friend, because going in with a friend, then you can share the burden and shine the light on one another. And that's got a kind of a double helpful piece there is you're sharing my friend Dana here, she, and you could introduce Dana, shine the light on what she's done, but also it's a way and you can even strategize ahead of time if you want, for me to say, oh, I really want them to know about that book you wrote recently, or that article you wrote, or that whatever that you're doing. And so I'm going to mention it, not Dana. And so she's going to be not as self-conscious, and it won't seem like, well, let me tell you about the thing I've done recently. It can be your friend saying, oh, it just so happens you'll probably want to talk more with, Susan over here, because she's done exactly what you're asking about. And so that's a really helpful tip in going into events and
you're
social
sharing
gatherings.
The conversation,
exactly.
Coming up with questions. So.
Exactly. Something Dana and I have also talked a lot about is the importance in a face-to-face meeting. Put away the devices. There is nothing we think is more detrimental than having somebody. It's really good to talk to you. Hang on. It means you're really not up for it. You're not in the space. You're not in the moment. You're not listening to the other person. So, in fact, I just heard this term phubbing, which is phone snubbing. So please don't do it. Don't. Save. If you need to look at your phone, go privately somewhere else and look at your phone. Don't do it when you're trying to connect with people. Face to face, being brief, being polite. If it's at a setting, literally saying, using the person's name as often as possible is helpful to build the connection. Inviting, them to give a couple of pieces of information before you share something about yourself is also helpful. We want to call out a book we'll be including in resources we'll be sending to all of you later on, by the way, but it's written by Jane Matson, and it's called You, You, Me, You. And it's a kind of a quick mnemonic, if you will, in terms of making sure when you connect with someone that you say, hi, I'm Becky, I'm Dana, nice to meet you. That you say, so Dana, what brings you to this event? Or have you been to this event in the past? And oh, good. And then you listen to what she said and follow up, including something about what she just said into the next question, draw her out further. Then you say, I did too. And then you bring in me, the me piece, and then back again to you. And this is extremely effective. And
it's a really simple message, but a very, very effective one. So we'll include that in the resource.
And we can all think of examples where we've met somebody who's me, 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 me. And at that point, you want to just say, I think I see somebody calling me across the room, bye-bye. And you've also probably either yourself or heard people around you that are only talking about the other person and not at all about themselves. And of course, that's not ideal either, because then you're not sharing anything about yourself, and they won't remember anything about you either. So one more point here is to be respectful of their time. And when you are, if it's an informational interview, the general consensus is 25 minutes to half an hour is what you'd be asking for a phone call or a coffee talk. If they want to offer you more time, that's great, they can, but don't assume that. And then at the end of 30 minutes, you can say, well, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much. And if they say, oh, wait, one more thing, or I don't mind, I'm not in a hurry, that's okay. That's an invitation then, of course, but don't suck up any more of their time than that. What else, Dana? What else? Think about, oh, and you'll follow up with a thank you, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, obviously, yes. Hopefully we don't need to tell you that. But thank you notes can be very effective in also reminding someone of something that you spoke about in common, or what you really appreciated about their conversation.
72 hours, that's another pointer I want to make. So all of the things that we've been talking about are worthless if you don't follow up. So if you are making it your strategy to collect business cards, again, we're not advocating that you collect as many as possible. We don't find that to be helpful. But if you are collecting someone's contact information, you best follow up, or it was sort of a lost opportunity and a waste of time to do so. So following up within 72 hours. So again, there's an event, you don't have to respond within 3 hours, but within that 72-hour window is the most effective sweet spot for you in terms of.
I would say also, if you have a personal meeting with someone, you should write a thank you note within
probably less than 72. I would agree with that.
I would say that. Yeah. All right. The final area that we would like to speak about briefly is when you're in those one-on-one situations or meetings, what are the questions you can be asking? And we'd also like to encourage you to put in some more questions for us. So when I'm finished with this, we can address those questions. But some people, you've heard of the cliched ones. Well, tell me about a typical day, or how did your career path go? And those are fine, but you can get a little more creative, a little more insightful, and you can also build on the research that you've done and ask even better questions. So first of all, I'd like to say, here are some things that you can ask people, types of things. One is you can ask for their perspective. If that person has been in this field for a while, they may have a perspective that you simply can't read in a blog, or, well, you might be able to read in a blog, but you can't find readily, and you're very interested because of where this person came from and what they're doing. They're going to have a very interesting perspective. A lot of times you can ask people for their predictions too, especially if someone has a strong knowledge about a company or an industry. You can say, how is this latest the changes in Comcast, how is that going to affect your work? Or this new scientific discovery, how is that going to affect your biotech company? I mean, you have to have done your research here, which is very important in all these conversations. But if you can show that you know something that's going on and ask them for their opinion on it, I think that's really helpful. And people like to be asked that. Sometimes you're asking for their advice. If you were me right now, what would you be doing? And I think people enjoy giving advice in general. You can also sometimes ask people for lessons that they've learned, stories that they have from their careers. What are the rewards and frustrations of what they do? Sometimes you can ask people to brainstorm, and you might be asking for I know the names of these large consulting companies. Could you help me brainstorm perhaps on some small ones that are under the radar that I might not be aware of? And certainly, as we've mentioned a few times now, you want to be asking people if there's anything you could do to help. And sometimes that can be tricky if you're a recent grad, but we'll help you with that if you want to brainstorm with us on that particular question. So I also would like to just throw out a few questions now that we think are a little bit better than your average, what's a typical day like for you? So you might say, what qualities do you think your most effective coworkers share? You're trying to get an idea of, wow, yeah, those are great qualities. Those are qualities that I have or qualities that I aspire to. And that makes me feel like I would really fit in a company like this or an organization or this industry.
Mm-hmm.
You might ask, is there something you wish your company would try that they're not trying? This can often be a really interesting question to ask people and help give you some insight into what an industry is grappling with at that moment. Mm-hmm. You might ask, what do you wish you did more of during your day or less of? I think everybody could probably pick things on either end of the scale there that they would like to do more of or less of. Sometimes you can ask about how does your organization encourage innovation, mm-hmm. or what happens when people make mistakes here? What is the response?
Or how are they at diversity and inclusivity and things like that, mm-hmm. too? You can ask.
Great questions. You might ask people, who do you turn to for your role models? Who are the thought leaders in this field that I should be following on Instagram or reading their blogs or reading their books or listening, because you may know some of them, but again, that's a great one for brainstorming. Who else do you find that you turn to for good insight and information?
And I would say too, it's important to show you've done the homework by saying, according to the research I've been doing, mm-hmm. or what I've been hearing from other people is this true? And mm-hmm. verify that. Mm-hmm. Is this a trend that is mm-hmm. happening, or is this a necessary skill set that I would need?
And then the final question that is always really interesting is to just ask people, why do you do what you do? Because I think people really like to say that or like to answer that. So that's a good one to have in your back pocket. So we'd love to hear your questions now, unless you have anything else to add. Becky, we'd love to hear your questions.
I think you've covered all of those. There are many, many questions, but these are just a few. Someone did, in the chat screen, I saw somebody ask about what if it is awkward and you're sort of feeling cornered or stuck at an event? What's a graceful way to exit? And you don't need to go into some grandiose explanation. It can be as simple as, I'm so sorry, but I just realized that I need to go get another drink of water, or I need to go to the ladies' room, or I'm going to need to make a phone call, excuse me, or there's no reason to be rude. There's absolutely no reason to say, you've been going on and on about yourself now for 10 minutes and I can't wait to get away from you. But you just need to be direct and concise, and that can be enough to say, excuse me, and if you're with someone and they keep looking over your shoulder at who else is in the room and you feel like they're not really paying attention, you can just excuse yourself and say, oh, I'll let you get back to your, whatever you were doing, and I'll go talk to someone else, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. No one expects you to stand by them all night.
I think sometimes if it feels like the person has taken a breath, you can also say, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And that's a pretty big, polite cue to offer somebody as well.
Right.
All right. So another person is saying,
I'm sorry.
That's
I just
okay. Go ahead.
scrolled up. Anyone had an issue with
how do you tear people away from their headphones in order to socialize? Yeah, I guess I would assume that if somebody has their headphones on, they're not wanting to socialize. One thing, I had to do a lot of flying when I was a child or a young adult, and I had some of the most fascinating conversations on airplanes, and I always knew what the person next to me did by the time I landed. I'm a little bit extroverted, a lot. But in today's world, I noticed that, even my husband puts his headphones on when we get into the airplane. So people, that's a lost opportunity as far as I'm concerned. But I think if they have their headphones on, they're really not your best target.
Yeah, no, I think, no, I would say no. I would say that's a clear wanting to get away. Okay, scroll on down here. Come on.
Love your idea of walking with a large set of predetermined questions. Are there samples you could offer? Absolutely. I named a few at the end. If you Google informational interview questions, you will see a lot of lists. But as I was trying to show, some of those are a little bit cliched and a little bit maybe dull. So I think thinking of the ones that are a little bit more creative, and I'm happy to help with that, and we can put some of these questions in our resources as well. And also asking questions that build on research you've done. For example, I noticed on your website that the mission of your organization is, is stated in this beautiful way. How do you think that really plays out on a day-to-day basis? Or based on my research, I'm seeing that there's a lot more companies merging in this industry. Tell me how that works. Or, based on your research, as Becky was saying too. So, yeah.
So I think, did you get to
this?
all of them? I think so.
I think that's
well,
all.
we would invite any one of you, if you have more questions, please feel free. We're easy to find in the directory here in career education, and I think we did cover those.
Give you a chance to take a break. Somebody's mentioning for introverts, it's good to take a break if you're at a large event. Yep. And
we'll be sending you resources as well. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we
hope you have a wonderful holiday season, first full of lots of gatherings where you can practice all of these good tips. And please don't ever hesitate to make an appointment with Becky or me. If you have further questions, we would love to talk to you about your individual situation and how we can be helpful.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.